Welcome to this next lesson on evolution. The first thing that we're going to do is we are going to look at a very, very important word that we have to understand as we are looking at how organisms change and why they would even change at all. That vocab word is niche. So what is a niche? I know we have a really, really big definition right here, but we have to understand what it is and what it says. It's not enough to just read this and be like, oh, I'm good. Right? We have to be able to break it down. Put simply, what is all of this saying? Is it saying that the organism has a specific role within its environment. Remember, the environment has to be stable. There's a lot of different interactions that are taking place, and there must be some maintenance of stability. Otherwise, the environment would not be able to sustain the different amounts of life and diversity that is present on it. Organisms all perform a specific role in their environment. The environment has different needs, and the different needs must be fulfilled. There needs to be producers. There needs to be decomposers. There needs to be different organisms that are going to do and perform specific functions to maintain the stability of that environment. So every single organism has a specific niche that it must fulfill. That's what this definition means. It means that an organism has a specific role, and that role is going to be crucial for the environment that it exists in. It's going to provide a specific function within its environment. So when we look at this, we have a few different types of evolution that can occur based upon the idea of these roles within an environment. So the first thing is to remember that we have change, and that change is existing over a period of time. And the first type of evolution that we can look at is called divergent evolution. So in divergent evolution, you start off with your ancestral organism, and that ancestral organism is going to then change over time. But as it changes, it's going to branch off and diverge. In other words, the species is going to have parts of it that are going to get more different than other parts. They are going to perform different functions within their environment so that they are going to minimize competition. Now, these two groups aren't competing with each other for the exact same resources. They might not be competing with each other for the exact same breeding grounds. They might not be competing with each other for the exact same food. The divergence minimizes the amount of competition within the group because they are now going to be performing different functions within the environment. Another type of evolution is called convergent evolution. And that's where, instead of just having one ancestral species, now you have two different ancestral species, and those two different ancestral species are going to come together. They're going to get more similar to each other. Now, you might be wondering, wouldn't that cause more competition, and wouldn't that be bad? And the answer is yes, it would cause for more competition, and that would be bad if they existed within the exact same environment. But convergent evolution typically happens when there are geographical barriers between the two different ancestral species. So they are going to fulfill the same niche, but in a different location. And that's where you have convergent evolution. Two different species in two different environments are going to end up getting more similar so that way they can fulfill the exact same purpose within their environment. And the last type of evolution we actually call coevolution, where organisms, again, if we had two different ancestral species, are going to change sort of together with each other, not getting closer to each other, not getting further apart from each other, where there is going to be change that occurs because of some change that has occurred within another organism. So there is something that will cause one organism to change, which then will cause some part of it to be favored, which will then have an impact on what aspects or traits are favored in a different organism. So now, What examples of these types of evolution are there? Well, first, Divergent evolution. In divergent evolution, the easiest example, you've probably already seen it, is with the Galapagos finches. Remember, only one species of finch actually ended up coming to the Galapagos Islands from the mainland. And then we ended up with about 13 different variations. So you have 13 different species of finch. And why do you have those different variations? Well, they all diverted from each other. From one main population, you have divergence that has occurred to bring about for different groupings that now satisfy different niches. Some of these birds eat seeds off of the ground. Some of them eat the flowers from a cactus. Some of them are going to eat insects. The thing is, they each perform a different role in their environment. They each have a different niche. And so, even though they all started off as one species of finch, they have undergone divergence to now fulfill different roles in their ecosystem, that when the finches first came to those islands, there were no other organisms performing those specific tasks, and so there was no competition for the finch that started performing that task. So a finch that all of a sudden started eating the cactus flowers, it didn't have any competition. The finches that were eating the seeds, they didn't have any competition. So the finches that diverted from the main population actually went away from competition. The finches that diverted from the main population lessened the competitive pressure that they were undergoing, because now the main population was not competing with them for that specific resource. Convergent evolution, we can see in flying squirrels and sugar gliders. These are two different types of organisms that perform the exact same function within their environment. Flying squirrels are found in North America. Sugar gliders are found in Australia. Sugar gliders are marsupials. They are not placental mammals like the squirrel. They are not directly related to each other, but they have many similarities because there is convergent evolution that has occurred for these two organisms to fulfill the exact same function in their environment. They have the same role or a very similar role in their environment, so they are occupying those similar niches. If sugar gliders were to come to North America, they would be in direct competition with flying squirrels. Next, coevolution. The easiest way to think about coevolution is if you think about bees and flowers and hummingbirds and flowers, and the fact that there is this coevolution where now the flowers will provide nectar for the bees, so that way the bees would come to them and bring, and then pollination can occur. Similarly, for hummingbirds, flower shape is impacted by this. Some flower shapes are better suited for bees, some flower shapes are better suited for hummingbirds, and some flower shapes are better suited for moths. So you can see, based upon what pollinates the flowers, it actually is going to have an impact on which flowers are going to be able to survive and which flowers would not be able to pass on their traits, all based upon the organism that is involved in pollination. This is also evident in predator-prey relationships. So the fast antelope can escape from the cheetah, then fast antelope will be able to breed, which will then have presumably fast offspring, and only the fast cheetah that can catch the fast antelope will also be able to breed, and thus you have this predator-prey relationship where both organisms, both species, are impacted by what is favored in the other organism. The faster the cheetah gets, the faster the antelope must be to actually survive and produce offspring. The faster the antelope are, the faster the cheetah has to be so it can reproduce and have offspring. So there is that relationship between the two, that how one organism has its traits favored has a direct impact on how the other organism's traits are favored or not. And this causes for some structural results over time. We're going to look at the first evidence that is intraspecific, and it is called a vestigial structure. The next two are interspecific. In other words, they are comparisons between different species. The vestigial structure is within a species, whereas the homologous and analogous structures are comparisons between species. Vestigial structures are anatomical or behavioral characteristics that no longer seem to serve a purpose. This could be the classic example of whales having a pelvic bone. Now, whales don't have hind limbs, so there's no reason for them to have a pelvic bone. This could also be seen in organisms that exist in caves where there are no lights. Now, a lot of these organisms still have a structural component for where their eye would be, but they are 100% blind. Having the eye socket in the skull serves no purpose because there is no functional eye within the skull. The next type of structure is called an analogous structure. And analogous structures are anatomical features that perform the exact same function, but the structure is different. The form is different. And so in this case, you could be looking at bird wings, for example, and insect wings. The way that the bird wing is structured and the way that an insect wing is structured is completely different, but they allow for the organism to perform the exact same function. They allow the organism to fly. Similarly, if you were to look at the limbs of a grasshopper and the limbs of an antelope, both of them allow for the organism to basically travel on land, but they are put together in a completely different way. So this is an example of an analogous structures. Analogous structures, again, are for the exact same purpose, but they are put together. Their structural components are different. Homologous structures, on the other hand, those happen to be anatomical features that perform a different function, but the structural components are extremely similar. The most classic example of this is the forelimb of mammals. The forelimb of a mammal contains the exact same structural components. It doesn't matter if it's on a cat, or if it's in a bat, or if it's a whale, or if it's a horse. All share very, very, very close structural components, but each one allows the organism to do something very different. The whale and the bat and the cat all have the forelimb, which does a completely different thing. The whales use their flipper so that way they can swim and they can guide the direction that they go. The bat is going to use its forelimbs as wings to fly. The cat is going to use its forelimbs on the ground to actually allow it to travel. On the other hand, our forelimb, we use it to grasp things, to pick things up, and to maneuver things. So we use our forelimbs for different aspects, but they contain the same basic structure. So, in summary, each organism must fulfill a specific role within its environment. And there are different paths of evolution that a population can undergo. They can either diverge, get more different, they can converge, getting more similar, or they can actually change as a result of change of another organism that's nearby that they are interacting with or that they might be competing with. The results of those changes can be observed based upon their structural components. That's it for this time. Be awesome, stay awesome.